This podcast is brought to you in part by Jfq Lending. With interest rates below 3%, there has never been a better time to lock in a low fixed interest rate on your mortgage. You'll never need to think about refinancing again. Set it and forget it. And with Jfq Lending, you're guaranteed to get the highest level of customer service. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and over 3,000 five-star reviews. Give Jared Ritter a call today at 480-637-7979 or email Jared directly at JRITTER@jfqlending.com. JFQ Lending, Inc., Equal Access Lender, licensed in over 40 states, www.jfqlending.com. Hey there, it's Patrick Engel, and you're listening to the Irish Huddle podcast. It's Thursday, September 17th, and I have the encyclopedic Lou Emoji with you. Lou, why don't you tell everybody now about the last time USF came to Notre Dame Stadium? What was your experience like? We all know what happened in the actual game and, the 80,000 people who sat through that thing for 7 hours or whatever it was. But give us a brief snapshot of what that day was like for you, just seeing this whole thing unfold in the press box that entire day.
Well, in 50 years following the program, probably the two most surreal moments were the 74 USC game where against a Notre Dame team that was going to play Alabama for the national title and was number one in defense, allowed 55 points in 17 minutes. Now think about that. I mean, the University of Alabama could play a Division II team and not score 55 points in 17 minutes. And the other was that South Florida game. And you have 3 hours of rain delays. You have 5 turnovers, 3 of them in the red zone, including the opening possession where Notre Dame easily drives 76 yards, and then a fumble and a touchdown the other way kind of sets the tone for the game. Skip Holtz as the head coach for South Florida. Funny thing about it is after that victory, Skip was 7-16 at South Florida. So he eventually took the Louisiana Tech job, and he's now 6-0 in bowl games there. But just one of the craziest days you'll ever see around in anywhere in college football.
It really is wild how that game for USF wasn't a, jumping point, spur point, whatever. Let's get the trajectory up here. Really, it was the last, hurrah in a sense. Everything just went downhill from there. I think that was the first year of 4 years they didn't go to a bowl game. But
they did turn around in 2016 and 2017. They finished in the top 25 of the AP poll both times, and then it really floundered badly under Charlie Strong, which is why you have new head coach Jeff Scott there.
Yeah, it took a minute to get back to those the top 25 finishes, like you said, after that Notre Dame game. But eventually got there, and yes, like you said, an opportunity here that I'm sure South Florida is looking at as a jumping off point, defining point, opportunity, whatever you want to call it, in Jeff Scott's second game as South Florida's head coach. Bulls opened up the season with a 27-6 win over FCS, the Citadel. But we're going to dive into that a little bit more. First, the best way to support this podcast is to subscribe to blueandgold.com. You can get $12 access for the entire year using the promo code ND12 for one. That's ND12FOR1. $12 for access to blueandgold.com for the entire year. And you can follow us on Twitter at Patrick Engel _ENGEL and BGI _Loose Emoji SOMOGYI. If you please be so kind, you can leave us a review, rate the podcast, subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Or if you're watching on video, please like us and follow us on YouTube. So, the forecast calls for 64 degrees, sunny, nothing with the weird rain delays seems to be in the cards. But we're already getting a little weird for USF2 Electric Boogaloo. This game is going to be on USA Network. I hope some It's Always Sunny fans just got the reference I made there. But yes, game on USA. Lou, have you ever watched USA, or do you watch any of the shows on there? Or when's the last time do you know if you have the channel anymore?
Actually, I do like Law and Order reruns there. So I watch that fairly often there. But no, you don't think of college football, that's for sure. They did have a back in the 80s, back in the day there, but it's been quite a while. Paul Burmeister will be doing the announcing with Tony Dungy as the guest host because Mike Tirico will be, I believe, on a golf assignment.
Yes, that is in fact why the game is on USA. US Open, which obviously isn't normally in September, moved to this week, and NBC is taking that. But anyway, I've been told by a number of people that Psych on USA is good. I haven't seen it, but I'm already readying right now. Over under, I'll set it at 5 burn notice references that we'll see in stories that come out of this game. So just everybody just get yourself kind of ready for that. But anyway, yep, game is at 2:30 on USA Network. And before we get too far into South Florida, an interesting little note here on a kind of an interesting subplot with this game itself. So it's part of a 3-game series, 2 games at Notre Dame Stadium, 1 game in Tampa, which USF will host. But to actually schedule those final 2 dates, the game actually has to take place, which, I mean, Lou, as we're recording this on Thursday early evening here, it sounds pretty good that would happen, but I'm not going to be fully thinking that, yeah, they're playing, and this goes for any game this year, by the way, until you see the ball in the air. Yeah. Or at least you see, half an hour on the clock or something. I mean, because just last week, I think on Friday, there was an ACC postponement in Virginia and Virginia Tech, I believe it was. So if the game is played, then these schools have an obligation to reach dates for the 2 future games by August 1st of next summer. And if they don't, Notre Dame has to pay USF $500,000. This is all per the contract that they signed in August when they put this game together. Of course, both of these schools lost games on their non-conference schedule, necessitating the extra game. So just a little interesting piece of minutia there. In all likelihood, or at least the odds are increasing with every word I say here, that the game's going to happen and they will try to schedule these 2. Still just kind of something peculiar to monitor. And yes, they did put a pandemic clause in the contract. But on to USF for this game and what we very briefly know about the Jeff Scott era. So the Bulls beat the Citadel against an FCS team that runs the triple option, frequently plays FBS teams and gives them a bit of a run for their money, or stresses them for a little bit before the game ends up being some lopsided score. But just some key numbers from that game. USF averaged 4.1 yards per pass, played 3 quarterbacks, and really one of the guys who didn't play was Cape Fortin, a quarterback transfer from North Carolina who was competing for the job. He was out. So averaging 4.1 yards a pass against FCS team doesn't exactly portend great things for your passing game, but it's really hard to draw that much from one, just any game against an FCS opponent, but 2, an offense that was installed this offseason amid times where you don't have a spring practice or have limited and just lesser time to work with these guys over the summer. So something that's very much in progress, as this, even just a simple box score would illustrate to you. A couple of running backs, which is where they did most of their damage on the ground against the Citadel, ran for over 300 yards. Johnny Ford averaged over 6 a carry in 2018, didn't play a whole lot last year. Kelly Joyner over 5.1 per carry in 2019. Those are kind of the 2 primary guys that got a good amount of the work last weekend against the Citadel, and you'll figure we'll see again. Also worth noting, they had 3 offensive linemen who didn't start, who would have. We don't know. It's one of those things where USF isn't saying who's out for coronavirus, who's out for injury, as is custom with most schools. So
it was listed as unavailable. And there was also a 4th offensive lineman who was unavailable as well. So that's one of those where the speculation is rampant that it must have been something with the coronavirus there. And whether they would be available this week is one of the X factors. But even if they are, Patrick, they were likely in quarantine here for a couple of weeks, and you're missing all that practice time and then going up against a pretty salty Notre Dame defense.
Yeah, I mean, just welcome to college football in 2020, where you have all of these things that it's going to be pretty customary for a team not to announce, all right, what any specific absence is, just unavailable. That's that. But yeah, Lou, as you look at this, and even if you look at the guys who do play, and at least a little bit of what we expect, or the very limited stuff we have from that game, you really see this as much of a threat to put up a lot of points on Notre Dame's defense without 5 Notre Dame turnovers?
Yeah, the running backs are intriguing. Johnny Ford, he's about 5'5", so it might be hard to find amongst all those linemen because their offensive line is massive now. That's even without the guys who were missing last week. But you have one guy 320, 309 on the right side, but that left side was 338 and 337, and one of the reserves was 368. So you put a 5'5" guy behind that, then it kind of makes it hard to find among them. And that's Johnny Ford, who as a freshman a couple of years ago ran for about 800 yards. Kelly Joyner also scored 3 touchdowns last week against the Citadel, had a decent season last year. Again, not a big back, but boy, it's the passing attack there that really is going to be essential for South Florida. Otherwise, Notre Dame can just gang up on the run. And for their top receiver, caught 4 passes last week, but it was for a total of 7 yards. Their starting quarterback, Jordan Mcleod, looks good, 11 of 16 in the stat line, but it's 68 yards, which, you're talking about just the dinks and dunks there. Very ineffective passing attack, and that was against an FCS school. So that I imagine Notre Dame's going to probably load up on the run, as they did last year against Boston College, which featured a couple of outstanding backs, a pretty strong offensive line, and you of course had A.J. Dillon, and they were able to completely shut them down. So, yeah, it will probably be difficult for points to come by for South Florida unless they generate some type of offense with the passing game, just to try to keep the Notre Dame defense somewhat honest.
When you look at 4.1 yards a pass, and this is absolutely a situation that's fluid, and you just assume that every practice is actually that much more meaningful for guys getting comfortable and learning things, just given how this offseason and coaching transition has went. But it doesn't really say much about, all right, they can come out and just sling the ball all over the yard and vertically challenge Notre Dame's defense. But to get an idea of at least what the offense looks like in theory, and what the coaching staff wants it to see, you can kind of go back to Florida Atlantic the last couple of years, particularly last year. The offensive coordinator, of course, Charlie Weiss Jr., I'm sure you guys know his dad, wants to play fast, a lot of tempo, like basketball on grass, whatever cliche you want to use for that. Involves a lot of tight ends. Florida Atlantic had the Mackey Award winner last year in Harrison Bryant. And USF has at least a couple of interesting tight end options. It has a grad transfer by the name of Mitchell Brinkman, came from Northern Illinois. I think he had about 440 yards receiving last year. So tight end usage, at least curious to see if they try to scheme up anything or target a particular guy or certain area of the field to get the tight ends involved. But those are kind of the main, at least, tenets you can pick up on. I'm kind of expecting that, no matter what effectiveness level they come out at, that at least USF's going to want to be able to go fast.
Yeah, that's been kind of the reputation for Charlie Jr. And boy, what is it about South Florida? You had Skip Holtz, former son of a Notre Dame coach, of a former Notre Dame coach. You have Charlie Jr. now. You had Charlie Strong as the predecessor, who was the defensive line coach here at Notre Dame in the late 90s under both Coach Holtz and Coach Bob Davies. So a lot of ties there. Certainly, I don't think they wanted to maybe tip their hand too much against the Citadel as to what to expect from Notre Dame. But like I said, I'm not sure if going to that fast pace will necessarily benefit them. Notre Dame is used to rotating players in and out on defense, especially if the play comes near the Notre Dame bench, to be able to quickly install. They've played Wake Forest, who they will play again on September 26th, the week after, and are used to that type of fast tempo that Dave Clawson had run. Now, again, how much practice are you able to put in because of the cancellations in the spring and missed several practices in the fall to just compete against it? In some ways, it's almost like going against the triple option, because you have to prepare a little bit differently for it. But if they have a decent running attack, which I think they can with Joyner and Ford, then I'm not sure if they want to control the clock or control the tempo. Maybe you can do it with both, but that's awfully difficult.
The tempo is not going to get you anywhere if you're running into a wall and
3 and out,
shanking passes and 3 and out, right? And at the same time, it can work to your advantage if you're able to bust some runs and get some guys on blockers and move the line even at all. And at least we saw Duke do that for a minute in the first quarter. Not last weekend, of course. Notre Dame was able to tighten that up pretty quickly. You just saw a few, bad pursuit angles, missing some run fits, kind of stuff that got sorted out fairly quickly, and just kind of one of those things where, all right, it's game speed again, right? Like, you can't replicate that in practice, and just once you get used to making reads, and I know they mentioned that Duke did some things they weren't really expecting. Jeremiah Koromoa actually told us that after the game. Yeah, they ran a lot more pistol. But anyway, a very, very minor kind of adjustment period. I wouldn't expect this to be anything that can really trip up Notre Dame's defense for an entire 4 quarters. And again, to be able to actually put 2 or 3 touchdowns on the board against them and make this interesting. And yeah, it was a rough offense last year. It was one of the highest sack totals of any team in the country. It was in the bottom 5, I believe, in sacks. Didn't throw the ball particularly well. Nobody caught more than 28 passes. Defense, definitely their strength. You look at the cornerbacks as being 2 pretty intriguing guys. KJ Sales is a senior. If anyone's going to get drafted off of this team, he's as good at that as anyone. Mike Hampton, other cornerback, had, I think, 15 or so passes defended a couple years ago. Only 2 returning starters in the front 7, one of them being linebacker Dwayne Boyles. And Brian Kelly said that, interestingly enough, he thought that was the linebackers and safeties in the middle, some of their strongest points. But we'll see. Lou, I still wouldn't expect it to be something that can, even when you take into account that Notre Dame's offense is very much a work in progress, not a finished thing. Certainly what we saw this past weekend against Duke was not, at least you think, the finished product, but more of a building block per se. Consider all that, though, and it still seems hard to believe that, all right, South Florida can hold them to 2 touchdowns or something like that. You still kind of think that the athleticism in movement on the offensive line that really came out last week with, I know this has been Brian Kelly's most popular talking point this week, is outside zone running schemes and being able to use the mobility of its offensive line. I don't really think that South Florida's defense is going to be preventing Notre Dame to do a lot of the things that it did well last week.
Duke's strength coming into the game, in addition to its 2 edge guys rushing the quarterback, was the back end of the defense. A couple of good cornerbacks, a good safety there. There was some depth there, and it showed. and the way they were able to, for the most part, handle Notre Dame's receiving core. South Florida also is pretty strong at the cornerback position too, and can even argue that that's probably their strength. So it's going to be intriguing to see if the Notre Dame wideout core, which only you had Wilkins come off the bench with 4 catches there, but and Avery Davis made the end zone reception, but it was a low volume overall of production there. 7 catches among the 19 completions. They were able to utilize the tight ends, and they're looking to incorporate the screen game more. But I would guess that in this game, Notre Dame wants to challenge the wide receivers to see what they're able to do against a pretty good cornerback core here too.
So let's get in more to the Notre Dame aspect of things we think we want to see or be important to see. First, a couple of words from our sponsors. Yesterday's Restaurant in Granger is a full-service restaurant serving some of the best food you will ever taste at Yesterday's Restaurant. The philosophy is simple. Life is short, eat well. They believe that every meal should be a special occasion. That's why at Yesterday's they serve only the finest organic and locally grown and produced vegetables, fruits, dairy, meats, and fish. They hand make most of their delicious meals from scratch using only the finest ingredients available. Everything they serve is fresh and guaranteed delicious, and the recipes are unique and original. From prime rib, fresh fish, to the award-winning Great Scott Burger rated by ZZ Zippy as the #1 hamburger in a 100-mile radius, you are sure to delight your taste buds. Yesterday's makes their desserts from scratch, fresh, every day, including the world-famous Corbett cheesecake. Let the staff who love what they do make your Yesterday's restaurant's experience outstanding. Visit us online at yesterdays-granger.com or book your reservation on OpenTable or call 574-272-7017. Looking for that unique Notre Dame item for the Irish fan in your life? Visit Augie's Locker Room, the country's #1 Notre Dame memorabilia shop. They have the largest selection of Notre Dame helmets dating all the way back to the turn of the century up until the present day, including the Shamrock Series helmet. They also have stadium benches, frame tickets, one-of-a-kind Rockney items, sign items, and many other unique pieces. If it is ND, they have what you are looking for. Visit them online at augieslockerroom.com or call 574-277-NDND. That's augieslockerroom.com. So, Lou, you touched on the receivers, and like you said, 7 catches. Ian Book only threw at them 11 times out of his 31 pass attempts. So, just coming into this game, if you ask me, the offense has one job out of all of this is get right with your wide receivers. And within that, I think the biggest, at least priority among any is I don't even care if it's 5 snaps or whatever. You have to get Jordan Johnson into the game. There's no reason not to play him because you don't have any redshirt stuff going on. And I know we just heard Brian Kelly talk about traits and off-field stuff and whatever that's keeping him on there. But there has to be, 5 to 10 plays that he can run, because even though you don't want to doom the position, especially considering who was out in Braden Lenzy and Kevin Austin, it's pretty hard to watch the Notre Dame wide receivers on Saturday and not kind of leave you wanting more, right? And Jordan Johnson can give you that, albeit in 5-10 plays a game. I think you've got to figure that out and figure it out now, and just see what he can do.
Yeah, I think they will. I think you will see him in action, and it might be in a limited capacity, but I think they may draw up a play. The person I want to see get involved is Braden Lenzy. Now, with the hamstring, that's especially a tricky injury, and specifically for a player with his caliber of speed. There's got to be a comfort, especially exploding off the line and taking the top off of defense deep. I bet they will take at least 2 shots with Braden Lenzy down the field, as they did with Lawrence Keys on the first play of the 4th quarter. It took that long before I think a pass went more than 20 yards down the field. But there has to be some kind of demonstration that they can challenge you vertically. I would expect it even if it falls incomplete or whatever, they're going to send Braden Lenzy deep on some play if he is available indeed, as Brian Kelly seemed to hint that he might be. Again, it's a tricky injury with the hamstring. The last thing you want to do is force it where you have a problem with it again, and then you're out for a few more weeks. So, but if he is in, I'm expecting a few shots down the field with Braden. And with Jordan Johnson, I think that could be some kind of a tunnel screen or something easy to get him just broken into the contest, to get the bugs out and to say, okay, here's your college football moment. Let's not let this be a strange occurrence where you're coming into the game suddenly on the road someplace and you're coming in cold and not sure quite what to expect.
Right. Just get him to the point where just even put him in a game, and even if you don't throw to him, or even if it's a play where he's run blocking or something, just get him in a little bit. So, all right, hey, this is college football. It's not a 100-foot deep pool with a bunch of shark-infested waters. It's not that bad. And hey, you're good. You're a 5-star recruit. And yeah, we can have 5 or 10 plays for you just to get you involved, get you feeling like this is something that you can do. And look, I just talked about Jordan Johnson. Before, Lou, you just talked about Braden Lenzy. What's kind of the common theme here with Bill? This upside, right? I mean, you see the upside with Braden Lenzy just because of the speed he can bring to take the top off you. We heard Brian Kelly talk about wanting to get the screen game involved more. He certainly seems like he plays pretty well in that with all the jet sweeps and the handoffs they gave him a year ago. And Jordan Johnson, kind of the upside of, all right, you see the 5-star ranking, but just kind of the thing of, that we don't know, like, hey, he's upside because we haven't seen him yet. Like, that's kind of intriguing, right? So that's really the theme with the receivers in general is, where are you going to find the upside? Because again, you stress that, yeah, it's one game. Yeah, they didn't have 14 spring practices and there's guys who were coming into new roles. Like, yeah, all of that is true, but it was, again, hard to leave that Duke game with thinking, the current crop of guys that were available then are some dudes who can separate against anybody, right? So just finding your highest upside group of receivers is, I think, a priority here. And yeah, I mean, South Florida's not an ACC team, or it's not Pitt or Florida State as far as the pure athletes it has on defense, but this was a solid defense a year ago with, like we touched on, some reliable guys in the secondary. So no, this isn't the group that, all right, you're going to judge them on this and all is going to be well if they roll out here with 20 catches and 300 yards among the receivers. But it would be like you want to see some type of progress here and just kind of see, all right, who's going to help us, achieve the upside in this room.
Yeah. And we also have to remember that wide receiver can entail a lot of different positions. On that 75-yard screen, Kyron Williams lined up on the outside there. So Jafar Armstrong arrived as a wide receiver recruit. He can line up on the outside. He came into this season with the most career catches in a Notre Dame uniform with 27. That's a natural, and he took that 20-yard screen right near the goal line to set up Notre Dame's first touchdown. So Tommy Tremble, he's somebody who can be detached from the line as a tight end and presents some mismatch problems. And speaking of mismatch problems, Michael Mayer is somebody who can do the same as a tight end there. So, we look at receiver position, but it can encompass a lot of different definitions. It doesn't necessarily have to be in that position group. There's a lot of guys who can line up on the outside who can present some damage as well. And, Brian Kelly talked about it at the beginning of the season, that they likely will employ multiple tight ends, 2 and sometimes even 3 out there at the same time, where then maybe your, quote, wide receiver options are going to be more limited, but at the same time, your tight ends can fill those voids. Tremble, I think, had over 50 snaps. Brock Wright had 32 as a tight end. And then Mayer was in there quite a bit too, over a dozen, I think close to 20 or so. So there are other options than just to look at it statistically and say, okay, the wide receivers aren't getting it done. Maybe they aren't, but maybe their roles are defined a little bit differently as well.
However you look at it, and yes, everything that you said, I completely agree with. You still need to get something from the guys who have the label wide receiver, right? Or certainly more than you got from them last week. I would imagine this is going to be still a time for Joe Wilkins to play a lot of snaps. He's not listed as a starter, but someone you can kind of see on either end of field receiver, boundary receiver. We saw him in relief of Dennis Skoranek at the boundary spot, but you kind of don't have a choice to, all right, hey, this is your most productive guy. Oh, let's bench him. And no, that wouldn't work, right? Like, and it's a rotational position. You're going to see some guys in there that are beyond the starting lineup, and you get 4 or 5 of them in. So anyway, you mentioned the tight ends, and I think that's interesting to take a look back now that we have a little bit of data on it. So we heard Brian Kelly talk about, like, we're going to be multiple tight ends. You're going to see 3 tight ends. You're going to see, I love my tight ends, basically. We saw proof why at least the top 2 are pretty intriguing. Certainly Michael Meyer dragging a guy will help with that. But so a quick breakdown here of the tight end personnel snaps. In 11 personnel, you have 1 running back, 1 tight end. Ian Book had 25 dropbacks in that, and that's not including all incompletions. That's including sacks and scrambles and whatnot. 10 running back carries and 2 quarterback designed runs. So that amounts to 37 snaps out of 11 personnel, with 3 wide receivers on the field. 12 personnel with the 2 tight ends was 23 is what I had it. 12 of those were rushes, 10 of those were pass attempts, and then you add in a sack. 21, we saw it with Tyree and Kyron Williams. That was only 2 snaps I had. And then one thing, at least we heard from Kelly, that we see 3 tight ends and not just on goal line or short yardage. No, all of these were short yardage situations. There were 7 snaps there. None of them, I believe, resulted in a completion. So just an interesting look there at the usage and a kind of an interesting debate in the preseason of who's that third receiver or in the slot receiver, how much of the snaps, say 70 per game, if that's just what you run on average, of that slot receiver, third receiver, are actually from a guy labeled a slot receiver and not a tight end who's out in the slot. So far, it's been in the favor of, in majority, the actual slot receiver. But yes, I'm curious to see if that changes as well, particularly if you see the reliability that you did from Notre Dame's tight ends that showed up last week. So let's go on to defense here and what we want to see from Notre Dame, and after what we can all agree was a pretty encouraging first performance. But first, let me tell you about varsity clubs. Coming to Notre Dame, plan your stay at the varsity clubs by Diamond Resorts, decorated with a collection of Notre Dame memorabilia and located just 2 miles east of Notre Dame in the heart of shopping and restaurants. As a special deal for our Blue and Gold podcast listeners, use promo code ZVISG and you'll receive 15% off your reservation. Varsity Club Suites offer a king bed with Diamond Resorts quality linens and amenities in every room, living area with a queen sleeper sofa, flat screen TVs, fully stocked kitchenette, and more. Relax as you lounge by the indoor pool where you can swim indoors and see outdoors through glass walls and a screen room. Play bocce ball or sit by one of the fire pits in the beautiful outdoor courtyard, or shoot pool with your friends and enjoy breakfast on us. Book your stay today at www.diamondresortsandhotels.com or call 800-438-2929 and mention promo code ZVISG and receive 15% off your stay at the varsity clubs. So defensively, yes, I'm sure you're all curious about Kyle Hamilton, Brian Kelly. called him day-to-day in his Thursday Zoom chat with us. I'm going to take that to mean that he's not going to end up playing. He did not specify if Hamilton practiced the last couple of days. But at any rate, I'm just going to work under the assumption that Hamilton will not play and that we'll see DJ Brown in there as a starter.
Yeah. The only thing he specified earlier in the week was that Kyle Hamilton was going to be in a walking boot through Wednesday and take it off. But my experience is if you miss the Tuesday and Wednesday practices, which are the two biggest installation and game planning sessions, as well as just Thursday is more of a review day and Friday is a walkthrough. And again, this is not meant as any disrespect to the opponent or all, but this is the type of game where you're not going to take a chance on an All-American like Kyle Hamilton to get injured. They can survive this game without him. If this were Clemson they were preparing for, I think the training staff would be in overdrive and everything else to see whatever they can do to get him ready. But the last thing you really want to do is rush somebody back into action when it's not necessary. I'll go ahead and say it. It's probably not necessary against South Florida to do this. So I would be surprised if he does see much action.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to need Kyle Hamilton to stop South Florida's passing attack. It does not seem likely. But let's talk about somebody who was going to be used more, or at least certainly earned the chance to, and that's Isaiah Foskey. So he did all that damage that you saw on Saturday against Duke in 14 snaps. I'm kind of thinking this is a game where you experiment even more with him, where it's not just a third down specialist or coming in at that spot. Do you see him more involved in some of the nickel packages where maybe not he, but you have three defensive ends in on the defensive line, whether it be him or Dalen Hayes or Ade or somebody else? I think you certainly owe yourself really the opportunity to play him 20 snaps a game or something like that, just because it makes your defense better, right? I mean, you can see the pass rush ability, and I know two of the plays weren't blocked, but we heard from him on Tuesday, and he specifically discussed the ways that he's gone about improving himself as a pass rusher. He's still a bit of a technically raw guy after that tight end background in high school was something that took up a lot of his time then. But I mean, you heard it say he's been working with Ade Ogundeji with his hands and being better at using those. And we saw that show up a couple of times when he was able to get off some of the blocks he did and wreck a couple of the plays he did. So I think you've got to have some fun with him if you're Clark Lee and just see, all right, where are the different situations we can use him? Can we do that? I know some defensive coordinators call it that NASCAR package where you put 3-4 defensive ends, whatever, on the defensive line and third down spots. So that's kind of another thing I'll be just looking for on defense is how much did he, force the hand of his coaches just to play him there in the game more because he was that disruptive.
Oh, we got to see how he is as an all-around player. They found a niche for him last week. That doesn't mean that it's always going to be just in that role. Can he hold the edge against the run? Is he disciplined to stay in his lane or not get out of it? And he certainly sounds the part there. He talks about, I'm just one of 11. It's concentrate on just doing your job and not trying to rack up stats here or there. But when you see him, and maybe it's because he wears the number 7 and those single digits sometimes stand out a little bit more on defense alignment or so, but he's got those same physical dimensions as a Kyle Hamilton for the safety position, as a Jeremiah Owusu at Rover, where you just point over there and say, that's what I'm talking about when you're looking at that championship caliber of athlete. That you say, okay, those are the guys that the Alabamas, the Clemsons, the Ohio States regularly get. And when he reported last August, at that first camp up in Culver, Indiana, and just the way you fill out a uniform. You just say, yep, that's got the look there. And you see like that long angular figure with a Kyle Hamilton as a 6'4" safety. You see just that freakish athletic ability or frame of a Jeremiah Owusu. And Foskey kind of falls into that category as well along that front line. And you know what? Dalen Hayes did too when he reported to Notre Dame as well. But now it's a matter of combining all those physical qualities and being able to just translate that into an overall defensive package and team play.
Tell me you didn't think about Stephon Tuitt at least once when you saw him in the
Yeah,
back of
number
that.
7. Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities.
Yeah. It's like,
or at least at their best there was.
He fits that genre.
Right. I mean, you don't want to make the full comparison, but between the number 7 and the explosiveness, and you still saw some power out of Foskey too. At least, it was hard not to think, yeah, I remember the last guy who did that. So we'll see where the usage comes in. But again, if you're Clark Lee, I think you've got to really experiment around it and see what happens. Is he just a guy who's on sub packages? Is he someone you can actually straight up rotate in there on first and second down? I think you're at least encouraged by it and want to try it based on what we saw against Duke. So the other interesting thing that I kind of came away from the game and it really after a few days started thinking about was, I know it's only one game, and I'm not sure that this game is going to tell us that much more about what I'm about to get into here, but at least I'd be encouraged, or I've kind of like planted the seed in my mind where, all right, I don't think it's impossible where we're looking up in a month or after, say, the Louisville game or something like that and saying, this cornerback room is better than it was last year despite losing 2 of its main guys. And at least to run through you the stats for you against Duke, Nick Mcleod and Tariq Bracy, the starters against Duke, targeted 10 times, allowed 4 catches. All of those were Mcleod's, 4 out of 7 for him. Bracy targeted 3 times, no receptions. They combined for 3 pass breakups. That's 30% of the targets you saw broken up. Probably not even sustainable, but that's really good. And of course, Duke didn't try to test him over the top, but all right, are you going to throw it deep if the guy's not open? I mean, no, probably not. So, and we weren't really any instances of that being the case. So I don't think that USF's going to be able to beat Notre Dame over the top, complete stuff, deep against them or get behind them. But I think you can come out of this game looking at another stat line like the one I just read off, what they did against Duke, and thinking, yeah, these guys can really handle the receivers and shut them down. The receivers that are you expect them to, in a sense. There's not going to be any surprise of, all right, this random guy on a team that's not good put up 150 yards against Mcleod or Bracy or somebody like that. I mean, these are veteran guys who obviously have some ball skills they displayed and seemingly improved ball skills they displayed against Duke. So that's kind of what I'm curious to see is there another repeat of last week where there's just nothing available there, and the only thing you can really get on them is, with a couple exceptions, back shoulder throws. I mean, I think 2 of the targets Mcleod gave up were on those back shoulders. So
very good coverage on those too. It's just sometimes that's the toughest.
Yeah, it's a hard throw to defend.
The cornerback to defend, but you can live with that. And I don't know if a team can always just make a living on the back shoulder plays there. But what you did like to see, they were in there challenging, and they were close up on there. It wasn't like there was a lot of separation. The ball had to be very, very accurate, and Chase Bryce is an accurate quarterback.
Between the primary corners last year, and even if Bracy didn't start a game, so in that sense he wasn't primary, but the 2 pass breakup leaders for Notre Dame last year among the corners were Bracy and Troy Pride. Bracy had a team high 7, Pride had 6. So 13 pass breakups and 1 interception between them last year. Mcleod and Bracy are already a quarter of the way there. And that's what you wanted to see out of that group. Was last year's corners were assignment sound, but not a lot of playmaking and just wanting to go get the ball or an ability to get on the ball. And we heard Nick Mcleod when he spoke with us on Tuesday, and Brian Kelly on Thursday talk about Mike Micken's mindset of play aggressive, like have a mindset of wanting to get the ball and take it away or bat it away. And I think that's the thing that would really make the unit better than a year ago is an ability to, not only not give up massive gains, which Notre Dame avoided last year, but get some interceptions, get some takeaways, and just get your hands on the ball, right? When you had Troy Pride and Julian Love in there in 2018, they were able to do that. 2017 was kind of the same situation. I mean, of course, it's Julian Love who could rack up 20 passes defended in a season, but I'm at least early on. We'll see what happens when you get one of those receiver groups that can really challenge you, that has some dudes. But encouraged that this can be a cornerback unit that's every bit as good last year because of that takeaway playmaking on the ball upside that you wanted to see a little bit more of in 2019.
Yeah, I think the first real tests at the cornerback position, though, are going to come in October when Florida State and Louisville come to town. And then especially in November, Clemson's got a pretty good quarterback. And Sam Howell at North Carolina with his veteran receiving core. Now, by that point of the season, you're going to be fully in the Mike Micken system and the overall Clark Lee system. And that will be the real challenge. I don't think these first couple of weeks necessarily, not Duke, South Florida, Wake Forest could have been interesting with Sage Surratt, who was a potential top NFL pick there, but he's decided to sit out this season. But Dave Clawson does have a good attack usually, and a very fast-paced one. I think that would have challenged them. But I don't think the real judgments can be really made on the overall pass defense and corner coverage until they get into some of the better passing teams on the schedule.
Yeah, you start looking at October 10th, Florida State, when Tamorian Terry, 1,000-yard receiver a year ago, 6'4", big dude, future draft pick, absolutely. And that's Mcleod's first, like, all right, this is it. Like, this is what you want to be able to cover. So, but right away, at least, no, USF, you don't think about as being able to just have someone that can blow right by them or who will be able to shake one of the corners off of their hips with the athleticism and route running and just an ability to really explode out of breaks. We'll see. Anyway, let's give you what you really wanted to come here for. Get to our over-unders. Up first, Lou. Does USF top 10 points over-under?
Well, they got three different quarterbacks. I think they want to try each one of them, and I think you may be able to put some points up late against the reserves. But man, those reserves are pretty doggone good too. When you have a Bo Bauer and a Foskey and a Lufu, maybe they might be able to burn out. I'm going to say under 10.
I'll go push and go exactly 10.
Yeah, that's probably.
I think they'll get in the end zone. They'll bust one long run. They have enough speed back there where there'll be a couple of big plays because it just happens. But 2 touchdowns, no, I don't think that's really realistic at all. Over under 12.5 catches for Notre Dame's receivers. Again, they had 7 a week ago.
They had 7. I expect that to increase, but probably more so 10, 11. I think they definitely want to get them involved early, but that's going to maybe open up some things with the screen game to the receivers, which they want, or the running backs, which I think they want to continue to work on them. They're not going to ignore the tight ends. That's still their safety valve. But I think they'll go deep early to Lindsey. Wilkins will be involved, but I just don't see it right now getting maybe to 12 and a half yet.
Give me the over. I think they're going to come out really wanting to try to establish that spot and see what you can get out of him. And of course, you've got Braden Lindsey. The potential is there to be a game changer, and we certainly saw it in the limited snaps. Assuming, of course, that he's good to go on Saturday and there's not a lot of restrictions, I think you're going to want to try to use him a lot. Over under 130 rushing yards for South Florida.
I kind of alluded to this earlier, is if Boston College last year, especially with A.J. Dillon, had problems because they didn't have a complementary passing attack to balance it out. If they couldn't do it, I have a tougher time seeing South Florida achieve it.
I'm going to go under. I'm not going under by much. You're going to have to gain yards somewhere, right? No one's going to hold them to an offense to 80 yards. I mean, this isn't someone rolling in here with a wing tee or something that's just massively outdated. It's hard to not at least just run into 180 yards of offense. Yeah, I think it'll be around 120. I don't know that the efficiency is going to be very good, but I'll go under, but not by much.
I could see the running backs maybe compiling 130, but when you factor in the sacks,
oh yeah,
it could be. Yeah. That's what I think will keep it under 130. And then you also have the situation with their offensive line, which, if the three starters are out again, and even if they're back, that's a rough initiation.
If you take out the sacks, I'm going over. But yeah, just on the pure final stat sheet total, that's the one that officially goes into the books with the sacks. Yeah, I'm going under. I hate that rule, by the way. I do not at all comprehend the logic of how a guy who's dropping back and sits in the pocket and gets sacked when he's looking downfield to throw is counted against his rush yards. But then again, you kind of get the fun stat lines where some quarterback has 50 attempts for minus 70 yards and 4 touchdowns. The Clayton Thorson Northwestern special. All right. Over under 5.5 receptions for Joe Wilkins, last week's star.
I'm going to go under on that one. He caught 4 passes. Came in kind of in a surprise role. I don't know if it'll be a surprise as much this week, but I can see him capturing 4 again. But I see if Lindsey is going to be involved, I think they would like to really get him, and probably Javon McKinley too. I think he was targeted one time.
Oh, I didn't have him targeted any. I don't think he threw in the ball.
There might have been one, but he was in there 60 snaps. And that's unusual. That's virtually unheard of unless you do run a triple option. So I can see those 2 guys getting involved a little bit more, whereas Wilkins, I think, will be right in that 3-4 catch range.
I'm going under here too. I can see 4. Maybe I could even see 5, but no, 5.5, I don't think so. But yeah, when you mentioned McKinley going 61 snaps, I don't believe he was targeted. Maybe there was one. I didn't have him down for any. You either look at that as 2 things: throw him the ball, or don't play him as much if you don't want to throw him the ball. I mean, yeah, he's a good run blocker. You saw it on the Kyron Williams touchdown on 4th and 1, but at some point you got to get something out of that position, right? And maybe we'll see him a little more comfortable at the boundary W position this week. I think that's a little bit more natural for him with his big frame and being able to win some contested catches. But yeah, it's a thing where I certainly don't think he's playing 60 snaps and not getting a target, because if he's not getting a target, again, I think you're going to wisen up and not play him 60 times, or you're going to throw him the ball, see what you can do. And at least for me, I'd try to give him the ball a couple of times at the boundary receiver. I know it was garbage time and against New Mexico and whatnot, but you saw at least some capability there to handle some college defensive backs and be able to assert himself against them. All right, 19.5 snaps over under for the aforementioned Isaiah Foskey.
I think he'll go over. Not by too much, but I could envision where this game, unlike Duke last week, should be over by the 4th quarter and hopefully even by the halftime. Certainly along the way in the 3rd quarter, and in those type of situations, then you want to get those reserves, the Bo Bowers, the Isaiah Foskeys, the Ovia Kofus, Jacob Lacey's, Jamion Franklin, Jason Adamalola, probably a little bit more time out there to be able to work on some reps that go beyond just, okay, sick him, go get the quarterback or so. Just see how he can function with maybe just a conventional offense.
I'm right with you there. I'm going over, and I agree with what you said, is just see what are the different things he can do. But I also think that I don't see the nickel and the dime packages that Notre Dame rolled out there last week as being those are the set ones for the entire year, right? And if you experiment more with Foskey in some of those different spots, like I had mentioned earlier, right, you put him as a third defensive end in there and kick somebody else inside who's usually a defensive end, again, or leave him out there for run downs and see what he can do there. Yeah, I'm going over you. He makes you better. Play the guys who make you better. All right, last one. Over under 30 seconds from when USF takes possession for the first time that the broadcast crew mentions Charlie Weiss Jr.
I'll go with the under there. I could see it right off the bat. And here comes the South Florida offense under the direction of Charlie Weiss
And then you
Jr.
pan right to him on the camera shot. Yep. I'm picturing
I
exactly
could
the same
see
thing.
I could see it even being in the first 10, 15 seconds or so.
Yeah.
It might be in the first 30 seconds of the broadcast itself.
If there actually is someone taking bets on this, I will come to them with a lot of money that it's going to be under 30 seconds. But yeah, I mean, you can just picture it. Yep, you pan to the team running out in the field, then you pan to Charlie, wherever he is in the field or in the box. Yeah, and of course, everybody wrote the story this week. Of course, if you haven't checked it out on blueandgold.com, our own Andrew Mentok wrote a story about Charlie Weiss's coaching career really getting started here in South Bend, where, of course, he will come back to on Saturday. But yeah, they're gonna do that, and probably not too long after, if they hadn't already mentioned that 2011 mess.
Yeah.
And he just kind of it's just too easy to predict.
I'm sure there will also be flashbacks to Skip Holtz.
Oh yeah,
and make that correlation with former Notre Dame son. The sun also rises with Charlie Weiss Jr. as well. So I'm sure that'll be a popular theme.
Yeah, over under 1.5 flashbacks of plays to that game in 2011. Yeah, I'm taking the over on that too.
I bet you they won't show the rage of Charlie Weiss after the incomplete pass.
The purple face Brian Kelly, is that what you mean?
A few years ago, Brian Kelly says there are two things in his career at Notre Dame that he probably, will always be eviscerated for. One is that contract talk with the Philadelphia Eagles, and the other was the purple rage against South Florida.
Unforgettable image right there. Well, yeah, like you said, not going anywhere from anybody's mind. But yeah, I don't think we're too likely to see lightning delays from what the forecast tells us, or some kind of lightning strike surprise that, hey, this is a game and USF's pushing them for 3 quarters here.
This is a game where you can literally have the theme lightning doesn't strike twice. And,
there you go. Put it on the NBC, or not NBC, USA graphic right now. All right, well, I think, Lou, we should get out of here. Hope you guys enjoyed listening. If you'd be so kind, please leave us a review.
Hey, you got to put in your prediction here.
How could I forget? Yeah, we really got to get the people what they want. All right, so I believe it was 48-7 in the edition of Blue and Gold Illustrated we published. I'm going to scale that back a little bit on the ambitious scale. Final word, 42-10, Notre Dame wins.
I had it at 49-10 in the edition. And, second game last year was New Mexico. They put up 66. I think South Florida is going to have a much, much better defense presented to Notre Dame. And you take you still have that leftover residue of it didn't quite function the way you wanted against Duke. So you kind of carry that over here. I'll go with 45-10, which counters the push. I had them under 10 points, but yeah, we'll go 42 or 45-10.
All right, lock it in. But yes, should be much more. At least we expect a not stress harrowing insert some scene out of airplane movie game. So we will talk to you again on Monday, recapping what happens in this South Florida second visit to Notre Dame Stadium. And of course, if that happens, it will lock in the other two games in this series. Again, the best way you can support the podcast is to subscribe to blueandgold.com. Use the promo code ND12 for one. That's ND12FOR1 for access to blueandgold.com for the entire year for just $12. Again, if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review and comments. Nice comments if you really liked it. We'll love you forever. Or if you're watching on YouTube, please like our YouTube page. We'll talk to you again on Monday. Till then, take care.